Hello everyone. Hi, this is Rahul, your Filmi Baniya. And today is a very, very momentous day for our amazing podcast. Today we are being joined by one of the most legendary figures in comic book industry in the world, Mr. Gabriel Bá. Gabriel, who's no stranger to India, visited India in 2014 Comic-Con India with his twin brother Fabio Moon, with whom he has created some of the most original and breathtaking comic books such as my favorite Daytripper and the most well-known TV show adaptation source material, The Umbrella Academy, which stars the very popular Elliot Page. And today we are really, really thankful to Gabriel who's joining us from Brazil. I assume you're joining us from Sao Paulo?
Yes, I live in Sao Paulo.
Yeah. So Gabriel is joining us directly from Sao Paulo. And a big warm hug and a big thank you. Namaste, Gabriel.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm glad we could make this happen.
Yep. Absolutely. And just to give a little heads up, our podcast, Filmi Baniya, is basically a podcast which features global personalities and global voices on TV, pop culture, books, and films. And Gabriel, I would just like to inform you that this podcast, we had Dirk Maggs, who was the director of the Sandman audio. And we are so privileged to say Mr. Neil Gaiman retweeted our interview as well.
Oh, that's great.
We're really proud of that. And I thought maybe you can connect a little bit of perspective on this. And today we're going to have some very interesting, fun conversation with Gabriel about his work on the Umbrella Academy. Umbrella Academy, incidentally, it has turned out to be one of the tentpole shows of Netflix, which has created this new original superhero verse. And today we're going to talk to Gabriel about his inspiration, what makes him tick, and we'll take a lot of fan questions for him. And I would just say that something very central to my education. I was in LA between 2008 to 2010. I briefly worked at the Gotham Group, which repped Dark Horse Comics for movie and television. And in fact, one of my contemporaries there, Edward Gamara, who was also incidentally the producer of the Maze Runner, the 3 Maze Runner films. He's now the senior vice president at Nickelodeon. That's the time when I heard of this amazing world of Dark Horse Comics, Because when you Gabriel, you come from India, the only 2 comic brands is DC and Marvel, and that's about it. I would even say Indians would largely know only Superman and Batman, and maybe Captain America. It's only when the MCU started hammering movies and content across platforms, people started to realize there's a new comic book verse as well. And So what we'll do is we'll now just start taking questions we have for you. Can I start with your permission?
Yes. Fire away.
Thank you. So Gabriel, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey. You are a very, very young comic book artist. And if one sifts through your biography, you have started literally from scratch with your brother, with your pen, with your dream, and today you have reached where you have. Just give us a little bit of highlight about yourself to our viewers here in India.
Okay. Well, I'm not so young anymore. I'm 44. So, but my brother and I, we always loved comics. We read comics through our entire childhood. We always loved to draw as well. Everything that had drawings appealed to us. And so when we figured out we could tell stories with drawings in comics, that's when we decided this is what we wanted to do. And we were around, 13 or 14 at the time. So we started self-publishing here in Brazil, just because we just wanted to make comics, copy the comics that we were reading, the artists that we liked, mimicking their style or their structure. So we started reading comics. We read a lot of Garfield strips.
Oh.
So, you know, having animals in the comics it seemed natural for us. And then also the type of movies that we watched and books that we've read. So if you have something like The Goonies, for example, it's a bunch of kids that join together in an adventure. So we used to create little teams of kids. So there's the smart one, the funny one, the girl. So all these kind of things that pop culture would, you know, throw on us, we would then turn into comics because we loved to draw. And so when after high school, we went to fine arts in college, both Fabio and I, but we still wanted to do comics. And not many of our colleagues in college, they knew about comics, or, you know, they liked comics or they read comics. So, and the stories that we wanted to tell were the stories that we could find in books or in movies about real life and struggles and relationships and real people. Not so much superheroes, because that was the easiest thing that you could find here in Brazil. Superheroes or comics for kids. The biggest creator here in Brazil, Maurício de Souza, he has a 60-year career. He's kind of a Walt Disney type of guy, created these characters, has a studio who draws them still to this day.
Wow.
So every kid here in Brazil learns how to read, you know, learns what comics are with these comics. But once they grow up, there's nothing to fill in that gap, so they stop reading comics. So the general idea of what comics are here in Brazil, it's for kids. And we didn't want to make comics for kids. We wanted to tell serious stories, reflections about life and stuff. So there were no examples back in the 90s of this kind of stories that we could show our friends. So we had to just make those stories. Very, you know, self-publishing, photocopying, folding, stapling, hand stapling everything, selling to our friends. So that's really how we started 20-something years ago.
Wow.
And we never stopped. Yeah.
Well, please finish your thought. Yeah.
I don't know. This is a long story, so I can tell it throughout all the questions that you have. So
okay. No
yeah, it's just like we started self-publishing mainly because there was no market here in Brazil in the 90s. We had this very bad economic crisis in the early 90s. So a lot of people went broke and a lot of publishers went broke, and they were not publishing Brazilian material. They were just publishing, you know, licensed stuff. So it was only superheroes or Disney. And so there was no perspective. So that's why we started self-publishing, because we just wanted to make comics regardless of if we had a market or not.
Wow, fantastic. This sounds like a very, very inspiring story, Gabriel, because, you know, if one looks at your works, I see a lot of personal stamp in each and every character of yours. I mean, if from my perspective, if you look at Umbrella Academy, it has so much nationalities, diversities. Although I'm not a very big fan of Leela Pitts' character, and she looks to me as if she's Indian in her ethnicity. And but otherwise, it's like if you look at the entire Hargreaves family, it's an amalgamation of a global race. So it's not like binary, black or white, or, you know, I saw that phenomenal diversity. What explains that you, so is it correct to say, Gabriel, that your comic book works are highly inclusive? And what explains this, this very diverse set of characters in Umbrella?
Yeah, well, coming from Brazil, I have a different perspective on race issues, I would say, even though now I have a better perspective than I had 20 years ago or 10 years ago, because the subject is very important right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I used to think that the stories that my brother and I told were universal because they were about relationships and, you know, things that everyone could relate to, everyone could go through. But we have to acknowledge that life can be very different for you know, each one, especially concerning their race. It can be very different. And so it's not exactly the same for everyone. So I have that in mind now more than I used to. But I try to have a diverse set of characters in my stories because Brazil is a very diverse country.
Mm-hmm.
And Gerard has this concern as well about Umbrella, but he and we know that on the comic book we didn't put that much thought on it when we started. Mm-hmm. And seeing how they adapted to the show makes a lot of sense, makes more sense to have them, because they were found and collected all around the world. So it makes more sense to have them a diverse cast. Yes. And we are trying to incorporate it with, you know, more characters on the comic as well. But I love that about the show. I think it's very, very true and very powerful. And yes, Lila is Indian. Yeah, she has an Indian family in the show, which is great. So.
Oh, great, superb.
Yeah.
Okay, and our next question is from Subhradeep Das. Now, Subhradeep is from Calcutta in India. They're part of this online Facebook community called DC Community of Bengal. It's like around 12,000 fans of DC Comics on Facebook. He says, we all know that 5 is everyone's favorite in the TV series, but how about Gabriel's favorite? Which brother, sister is the best out of his creation?
I don't know. Like from the comic book, I think my favorite is Space Boy #1, Luther. He is more the kind of, he is more a #1 leader type on the comic book than he is in the show. And he's more fun to play with because he's very confident, and even when he, you know, lets go and he gets fat on the second volume, he's the most fun to work with, I think. And I helped develop his visual more than the other characters. So I have I'm really fond of Space Boy on the comic book. But on the show, they are all of them have their strengths and their personalities. I think what appeals more about #5 is that he is the closest to the comic on the show. because of his looks, because he's a kid, the school uniform. It's the most similar character from the TV show comparing to the comic book. So he's the perfect translation of a character, and I think Adam, the actor, does a great job. He's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a great kid, and he's perfect for the part. But I love all the characters. I really love, people love Klaus, for example, played by Robert Sheehan, and he is great. He's amazing. It's very funny. I love Diego, played by David, and because he is he is the serious one. He takes everything seriously. He is the vigilante still, who didn't give up the fight against crime and this sort of stuff. He wants to do good all the time, and he's just funny because he doesn't get it right all the time, and it's okay. So I like him very much. I think Allison got a really great upgrade on the second season, which was very nice to see. I told them like the subjects that they would make her interact with and handle were very important, and we couldn't just tell this story lightly. So they did a great job, having her dealing with the civil rights movement in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. So I don't know. I like all of them. And Elliot is great, very subtle. I think the character of Vanya is very subtle. It's not so funny as some other characters. It's not so serious as some other characters, because she's fragile, and she was hurt, and she's discovering herself, and has all these interior fights. So, and Elliot does a great job doing it. So.
Okay. The other thing is that, just like Watchmen, possibly one of the greatest comic book of all times, especially the TV adaptation as it has come out, I've seen there is a very, very concerted effort to include modern day political environments in subtle or not so subtle forms on television and in films. Would you say that this trend is going to continue, or are we going to see comic books which will not be that political? I personally feel, because in the age of social and digital media, people have all the rights to express themselves. And I come from India. India itself, as you know, is a very, very plural, diverse country. It has one of the largest Hindu as well as Muslim populations of the world. And I'm very, very excited to know, how do you look at politics as a tool for storytelling in your stories? Because if one just goes to your Instagram account, I mean, one gets a little bit of a refresher course in your political perspective. My question is not that political. My question is, why do you feel politics at the center of the story? Does it amplify the storyline, or does it overwhelm the story itself?
I think you can't use your story as a pamphlet for political ideas, or because that would weaken the story. But you have the power and responsibility when you're telling fiction to talk about reality, to make people reflect on reality. So, and that's what we do. We tell fiction. It's not like Joe Sacco's work. So, and I think for a long time, people in the entertainment industry would avoid so much talking about current political affairs, but I think we're, maybe because of what you mentioned, like this right-wing takeover all across the world, maybe it's we can't just stay silent or not use this tool that we have to, tell some messages across, so people would reflect about this stuff. I don't tell stories so people would forget about their lives and their problems. I tell stories so people could reflect on their problems and try to, come with a solution or try to understand them better, deal with them, and not forget about them. So I think one of the reasons political issues are being dealt with in pop culture in general these days is because you can't avoid it. It's just like telling a story now in a world without COVID. You can tell it, but it just doesn't make sense. But if you want to tell a story in a world with COVID, you need to be careful to which story you're gonna tell, and if it will help people now deal with it, and if it will survive the tests of time, because some things may make sense now, but in a 5-year future, 10-year future, they won't. They will not. So that's the problem of talking about current issues in politics or whatever, because they expire sometimes very quickly, and good stories they can last forever. So that's what you have to be careful about when talking about current issues. So that's why I think like the second season of Umbrella Academy was very successful, talking about the African American fight in the US and across the world, because it's a current issue, but it was dealt talking about the civil rights in the 60s.
Yes.
And so you can put in perspective how all the accomplishments and the conquests they did in the 60s, they seem to have been lost or to not stand for anything anymore. The people have to realize what they have, they have gained, and not give up on that. So that's a good way of using fiction to talk about real life and current political issues.
Well, thanks for saying that. This is something which is really, really, this is really funny that we're having this interview right now in India. India is right now going through, its largest ever protest in human history, in fact. There's a farmer protest right outside New Delhi, where I live in. We have close to 500,000 farmers, all doing a very silent, peaceful protest. They have actually cordoned off the borders in Delhi. And that's because the government has come out with 3 farmer laws, which, I don't know much about, but those laws are not, as the media is reporting, not very favorable for farmers. And what I've seen is that because of social media and because people are now coming out and talking about politics, these protests are not inspired by any political party. It's largely farmers going out on themselves. And this is something, because India is a democracy, Brazil is a democracy. You have all these nations all over the world where protest is now becoming more active. People are protesting whenever they're seeing something going wrong. But more than that, I think comic books, since time immemorial, I think the first political comic book I ever read was V for Vendetta. you know, I mean, that was like really in your face political. It's like purely anti-system. You have, and you know, it's so funny that that movie has gone, the comic book came, the movie came, and anywhere you have any protest, people are having those Guy Fawkes masks everywhere. That's the beauty of comic book writing, you know, these things manifest in real life as well. And thank you so much to talk about politics, actually, Gabriel. You're one of the very few people in this industry wherein I've seen who talk openly about it. And I think it's high time people should look at it. And that's quite amazing. My next question is from our reader, Anshuman. His question is about Reginald Hargreaves and any real life inspiration behind the creation of Reginald, who looks like Professor Charles Xavier from X-Men. I mean, the whole idea of him along with kids in a school-like environment, a little bit of inspiration there, or was there any real life inspiration behind Reginald?
I don't think there's a real life inspiration for him. I'm pretty sure Gerard, who's the same age as I am, grew up reading the X-Men, and you know, this idea of one guy, the professor of a school who leads their, you know, kids to develop their powers. It's impossible not to have this reference and this comparison with the X-Men. But Hargreaves is the opposite of Professor X, because he was not supportive of the kids, and he just wanted them to, you know, train and succeed and use their powers as much as they could. And I see Hargreaves as that kind of father who trains their son to be like a Olympic athlete, and you know, no matter what costs. So there's very little fatherhood involved. It's more like a trainer, it's more like a coach, but a very hard one. So, and I don't think there's a real life inspiration for that in Gerard's life. But you know, in my life, it doesn't as well. So, but I like playing with that because it's like he has no feelings whatsoever, or he doesn't really care about hurting feelings of his kids, and that's what's fun about working with Hargreaves, because he just doesn't care. He has a mission. He has a very logical way to understand everything, and he doesn't care about their feelings, or you know, if he's their father, he should care. No, he doesn't care, and that's a fun part. And I think, especially because I don't have that in my life, and Gerard doesn't have that in his life, it's a great way to experiment and to explore this kind of character, and what that what effect that has on all the kids, on all the other characters. So that's what I like about Hargreaves.
Okay, and by the way, to my audience here in India, Gerard Way is the co-creator of the Umbrella Academy with Gabriel, and maybe one of these days we will have him as well and on our podcast. And Gerard is also a very, very equally important force in this entire Umbrella Academy movement with Gabriel, and he is also the American gentleman in this entire equation. Just tell us a little bit about how did you guys meet and how did this collaboration start? Because you are in Brazil, he's in the US.
Yeah, well, we met through the editor in Dark Horse, because he presented the initial idea to Dark Horse, and they liked it, and they needed an artist. So they looked to some artists, and they found a few of my works that I had published. I was starting to get some works published in the US. So I had this comic book that I do with Matt Fraction called Casanova.
Yes, yes, very popular.
And that was just coming out. And I did a self-published comic book called Rock and Roll with my brother and two other friends that they could find at the time. And my brother and I had published an anthology of short stories in Dark Horse called Details. There were stories that we did here in Brazil of, day-by-day life, relationships, and this kind of stuff. And we published that in the US in 2006. So they had these 3 different comics because Details is very real life based. Casanova is a sci-fi interdimensional spy adventure, and Rock and Roll is kind of an adventure with a rock occult cult, and so it was just a fun comic book to do. So they had these 3 examples of my work, and they liked it, and they reached out to me.
Okay.
With the initial idea of the series, what it was about, who were the characters. There were a lot of initial sketches from Gerard, and I liked the story because it's from the superhero genre, but it's not about that. It's about their struggles with themselves.
Yes,
as
absolutely.
a family. Yeah, so as a family who grew up in this, messed up environment, and who split up, and after their father died, they're forced to join again and then save the world. So that was a very nice and challenging, idea to develop a story. So, and I could play with the superhero genre because I hadn't. I was not cut off to work on regular superheroes. I tried to in the early 90s, mid 90s, when I was starting my career. I tried sending submission pages to Marvel or DC, but they didn't look good enough, because what really drives me creatively is the story, not only the art. If I have a good story to tell, my art will improve a lot. If I don't have a story, submission pages are these pages that you do as a test to see if you can draw a fight scene, a conversation, backgrounds, action, but there's no story behind it. So for me, they're empty. And I'm not this kind of artist. So I grew up reading a lot of superhero stories, and I have my favorites and favorite creators, but there's just no story for me to tell in superheroes.
Okay.
But on Umbrella Academy, I saw the potential of telling a great story in the superhero genre and being able to help create these characters and not only work with characters that already existed.
Superb. And our next question is exactly what you just told us. So this is from one of our readers, and her name is Aditi from Delhi. And she's asking, what are the favorite comic books of Gabriel himself? What are the comic books he likes the most?
I don't know. There are too many.
But just name us some of the seminal ones, something which has really changed your life or influenced you in a big way.
Yeah, okay. So the easy ones to find, the superhero ones that I read when I was a teenager, that really, got me hooked into the medium, the storytelling, the artwork, the adventure kind of stuff. I think there were like Dark Knight Returns from Frank Miller, Watchmen. There's also a Daredevil story Frank Miller did with David Mazzucchelli called Born Again. Mm-hmm. So these were stories that I read when I was a teenager, and I was, you know, amazed by their inventiveness and their dynamic structure. And then some of these creators, like Frank Miller himself, he went to do a completely different thing when he did SimCity. Yeah. So, which was great for me because I realized a creator could create their own characters, not only work with characters from Marvel or DC. They could create something new, which was very liberating. They could tell stories in black and white, which I love, and was also very liberating because most of the comics, they were in color, and you don't have to do it. It's not because it's in color that it's better. Then I don't know. I also love Mike Mignola, his work. I love Hellboy. It's an amazing, fun character and a great way to tell stories, including global fantasy and folklore stories. Mm-hmm. Mystical creatures. You know. What else? I like. Well, two of my favorite Japanese comics are Akira, of course, because it's overwhelming, mind-blowing. There's nothing like it, and it really changed the scale of comics, the scale of a story. Not in terms of how long it will be, but you know how massive your story can be and how massive destruction or amazement you can portray in a comic book page. And it really changed not only my perspective on comics, but a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And also this comic book called Tekken Concrete from Taiyo Matsumoto. And Taiyo Matsumoto is a much more not independent, but alternative manga creator in Japan. But he's great. He has other amazing works, but Tekken Concrete for me is very good, especially because his artwork is very European inspired as well, and not as much just the straightforward Japanese artwork. And Tekken Concrete, you can find it. They made a animation out of it, so a feature film animation, which is great also. So it's a great way to find the story. I love the works of I love Bone from Jeff Smith, which is great. It's a great adventure fantasy, very inspiring, and he as a person, as a creator, is very influential on our work, my brothers and mine, because he is a independent cartoonist, self-publishing. He did all by himself, wrote, drew, published, sold, everything, and does it still. So it's a very inspiring figure for us. And yeah, there's a lot more. There's this French cartoonist called Cyril Pedrosa. He is an amazing artist. And he has this story called Three Shadows. So, and it's about a father and a son, and these three shadowy figures who come to his son, and he has to escape these figures to save his son. It's an amazing story. Well, there's, the list goes on and on.
Okay, no problem. We have limited time. But Something. So now a little bit of.
Oh, I just must add one name to this list. It's Alison Bechdel. It's an
Okay.
American female cartoonist, and she has this amazing work called Fun Home.
Fun
It's
home.
yeah, Fun Home. It's a memoir. It's a story about her memories, her life with her father when she was growing up, and the discovery of sexuality. And it's an amazing, amazing comic. One of the most best written comics I've ever seen, and she's just great.
Wow, fantastic. Looks like a whole crash course in global comic book industry and the content. Gabriel, I would get to one before we have the last one or two questions now. One of the major comic book works of yours, which has really impressed a lot of people with the real comic book connoisseurs around the world, because I have a lot of friends in LA and New York, as well as in Mumbai and in New Delhi. Here they talk end and end about Daytripper.
Okay.
I mean, so my question is now from one of the gentlemen who hosted you in New Delhi in 2014 at Comic Con India. He works with them. Aniruddha Chakrabarti. He says, tell us about your work on the Daytripper. How did the idea of such a surreal and yet unique story, which is told in non-linear fashion, what was the inspiration behind Daytripper? Just tell us a bit about that.
Well, Daytripper it's a story about life, but the way we chose to tell it is, as you said, non-linear, because it's like this puzzle that you find one piece here and one piece there, and we want the reader to realize every piece is important on itself, but as well, when they're put together, they will form the whole picture of your life. So, and I want the reader to reflect on their lives while they're reading the story. And the way to do that was to present to the reader the depth of the character over and over.
Yes, it's quite outstanding. In fact, there are some YouTubers in India who review comic books, and one of them has made a 20-minute video just reviewing Daytripper. I mean, I'm just saying that.
I think it's like he did it this year, right? He did it recently. He did it recently, didn't he?
Yeah, he recently.
Yeah, I think I saw it.
Yeah,
it was a very nice review. Very nice, going through the whole story.
Yeah, it's a channel called For the Love of Comics, and
yeah, maybe.
But if you look at Daytripper, it reminds you of how Tarantino told Pulp Fiction, as a story. And even if you look at somewhat like, I won't say Memento, but it has those shades of building a story with the reader. It's very interactive that way. And
I think the Daytripper is a very hard to explain. It's very hard to explain the story to someone. It's something that you have to read and experience it, just like life itself. And it was hard to explain to the publisher, to the editors before we did it, and it's still hard to explain now that it's done. You can't simply say, "Oh, it's a story about this guy, and he dies every chapter. I don't understand why, or is it multiple realities?" It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a reflection of your life and the fact that you can die at any moment. And are you paying attention to your life enough?
yes.
And because the more you are faced with your mortality, or the more you realize this is all you've got.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Time's
you
running
have
out.
to get the best out of it. You know, stop wasting your time and cherish what you have. Um, so, and that's the power of death, but not in a dark way. It's just what it presents someone when someone close to you dies. Um, you wish you could spend one more day with that person, or you remember what you've done together, or you wish you could have done more stuff together, but you can't. So that the death presents you to this reflection and gives you the option about the rest of your life. So you can't, you know, have another moment with this person who has already died, but you can take 1,000 moments with other persons who are around you. So, take
Fantastic.
deeper, appreciation to the people around you. And it's this kind of thing, and every chapter deals with a different age, different issue of the main character's life, and I think they connect with different readers in a special way. So people like one chapter better than the other. They are the ones who are who lost their parents, and they relate to the one when his father dies, or the ones who just got their first child. And once I was in France in a signing session in a store, and there was this old lady who had just lost her husband a few months ago, and Daytripper helped her deal with that. So this is an old lady that I would never imagine she would be reading a comic book, because that's not something that happened here in Brazil, but in France it does. And my story helped her dealing with the death of her.
So are we going to see a Daytripper movie or a TV show?
It's I don't know. It's not up to us, and I think one of the things that we are most proud of in Daytripper is that it's a story that was meant to be told in comics.
Oh, okay.
As a language is the perfect language to tell this story that goes back and forward. It's very intimate. It's a very intimate language with the reader when you turn the page to make the story move forward. And there are silent moments, there are close-ups. So not only the story that we wanted to tell, but the way we wanted to tell it. It's one of the reasons we love comics. And
fantastic.
It's just a hard thing to just translate it to a TV show or movie. So we are really happy with it.
Maybe you should get Christopher Nolan to do it for you.
Well, I don't know. He's doing okay.
I mean, he's the one who keeps playing around with time and sequences. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. Okay, so our question now is this is actually a fan question from Sunil, who's yet another reader. He says, what can we expect in the season 3 of The Umbrella Academy?
I don't know. It's going to be great. Can't really tell more about it, but as far as what I've seen so far, it's going to be great. And if people liked season 1 and they could notice how season 2 was an upgrade, season 3 is going to be even better. So, yeah.
Okay, it looks like he has to go. Our reader has to go and see it himself. And any your experiences about India? Just briefly tell us about what do you think of Indian entertainment, Indian content, Indian comics, if you have seen any, Indian films, anything you like?
I haven't seen much of the Indian films, which is, it's just these things that happen. India is one of the biggest industries and produces lots of stuff, but it, they don't get exported as much.
Yep.
But to be honest, I don't really watch anything anymore because I have very little time. I have a young daughter, and I have to work. And with this whole pandemic situation, I don't have time to watch anything. But when I was in India in 2014, I noticed a lot of Indian comics were reality based. So there's a lot of biographies, a lot of and a lot of what was it? A lot of mythical stories as well.
From the culture, from mythology.
Yes, my mythological stories. I saw a lot of those when I was in India. And some like Indian superhero kind of stuff. But that was like one show. I can't really say I know a lot of the Indian comic book scene, because as well it doesn't really get exported. Being in Brazil, I know how difficult it is to get the local production seen anywhere else in the world.
Well, it's just to say, Gabriel, comic book industry in India is also facing a lot of tough times. The way it works is that there's a lot of DC Marvel stuff already, and there's a big. So now, what I feel is Netflix is one of those rare occurrences wherein we could have never dreamt of an Umbrella Academy sort of ensemble, because you have to. If you see, Marvel is owned by Disney. DC is owned by Warner Brothers. So they're both studios in themselves. I think because the delivery of content like Umbrella Academy is on Netflix, it'll become far more addictive, will have far more audiences, and will have far more reach for creators like you, which a movie would have. And one can see what is happening with HBO Max, wherein now they're releasing Wonder Woman on HBO Max as well as the theaters. We are seeing very interesting times. Well, that's for today's questions. And Gabriel, a little bit about our podcast. I run a podcast called Filmi Baniya, and we have been doing this podcast for almost 6 months. This was my venture out of lockdown, and we have featured a variety of Hollywood and global writers for Indian fans. But more than 2 years, I've been writing on television and film for newspapers. And that's when I connected with you first, actually, since last year. And I'm so happy that now we have a video show. We can, do a chat like this. And thank you so much for your time. And would love to know more about Umbrella Academy as it comes. And please do give us your bites when you are ready to tell us about the next season or about your new work when it comes forward. Many thanks.
Yeah, it's just takes a lot of time. I know as a fan point of view, you want everything right now because you love it. And I do love a lot of stuff, and I want them to come out. I want people to keep working and producing, but it just takes a lot of time, both comics and the TV series. So the fans just have to wait a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. That was many thanks, Gabriel, joining us from Sao Paulo, Brazil, the creator of Umbrella Academy. And thank you so much. And thanks for watching. This is Rahul signing off for Filmi Baniya.